Hello again. Today we're going to focus on decimals on a number line. I wanted just to show you with some visuals how the number line looks and how it works. So we start with tenths, and you can see this is our original tenths grid. And we've compared it before to dimes. And so there are 10 here. Each space is going to represent one dime. Say 1 dime, 20 cents, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. That would take us to $1. So we've often said our dimes are like the columns or our dimes are like the tenths. Now, you can set up your number line this way, but it's actually easier if you just refer to the tenths in their actual place. We know that this is the tenths place. So if I just keep the 1 there and remember my place name, I don't have to add extra zeros and make my task a little harder. All right, so those spaces represent our columns or our tenths. But we also know that we partitioned our grid a second time, and this is what we traditionally see when dealing with tenths and hundreds. So this one column, this tenth, contains 10 hundredths or 10 pennies. So they will be represented in between every tenth. It would go like this. Let me count for you. We start with 0, and this is 1 hundredth, 2 hundredths, 3 hundredths, 4 hundredths, 5 hundredths, 6 hundredths, 7 hundredths, 8 hundredths, 9 hundredths, and then I reach 1/10. 1 hundredths, 2 hundredths, 3 hundredths, 4 hundredths, 5 hundredths. Sorry, this is not loud enough. 1 hundredths, 2 hundredths, 3 hundredths, 4 hundredths, 5 hundredths, 6 hundredths, 7 hundredths, 8 hundredths, 9 hundredths. And this right here would be 10 hundredths or our 1/10. Like that. Okay? So let's take a look at some number lines. The first task, I'm going to place points on the number line given either the decimal or the fraction. Now this number line goes from 0 to 1, but it has 100 tiny spaces. So we know that these are our hundredths and that there are 10 of them, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 tiny little pieces available. Well, I am not going to count one by one. I'm going to use a strategy. So I know that this, oh, my markers are all getting dry. I know that this 8 is in the tenths place. So instead of counting 85 hundredths, I'm going to go to where 8 tenths is. Now notice, they look exactly alike. 0.8, 0.8. So now I'm at 8 tenths, but I have 5 more hundredths to go. So this little dark mark, I think most people are used to that. It means 5. We have 10 between each tenth, and that represents 5. So 80, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's point J. All right? Now, the same thing's true when I look at my fraction. Even though they wrote it as a fraction, 28, well, these are tens, or in this case, because they're apart, they're tenths, and these are my hundredths. So I'm going to start at 2 tenths and then count over 8 hundredths. I know this is 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm going to label it point E, right? Again, I have another point. It begins at 1/10, so I match it right there, and I need to count over 2 more hundredths, and there I place point N. All right? Let's look at it again. Point L needs to go, and it says this time 50 hundredths. Well, we learned in previous lessons that 50 hundredths is the same as 5 tenths. This is thought of as 50 tiny spaces, and this is thought of 5 spaces that have 10 in each. This is thought of as 50 cents. 50 pennies. This is thought of as 5 dimes, both worth 50 cents. So this one's easy. I can place it right there, knowing that 5 tenths is the same as 50 hundredths. For point M, it says to go to 7 hundredths. Well, 7 hundredths is right here. It's not even 1/10. And this is one of the trickiest areas that kids experience. They always want to start with a tenth. But remember, we have grids before that have not had a full column shaded, and that's okay. So count over to 7 and label it M. And the next one begins at 9 tenths, and then it goes over 9 more hundredths, right to the end almost, like so. Now you won't be placing them because I wouldn't have you do that online. So your task will involve telling me the names of things that are already on the number line. And if you need to, you can certainly touch and count on your screen when you're practicing and completing your assessment. All right, so it says write the fraction and decimal for each. Now for the fraction, we know there's 100 spaces, so that's going to always be my denominator. All right, I'm going to start with J. Here's 1/10, so I know it is less than that. It's going to be tiny. 1, 2. 2 out of 100. And don't forget, you are more than welcome to keep drawing these place values with their names, or place, places, sorry. I'm getting a little tongue-tied. You know me, it's like Friday. All right, so 0 ones, because we did not make it to the end of the number line. There are no tenths, because I did not pass a tenth, and I only reached 2 hundredths. The common mistake is sometimes kids want to write that, but that's incorrect because it's there and my point's far before it. Right? Now if I look at E, I'm going to start with the tenth that it passed last, and then count over, and I see it's right on top of that halfway point that's very dark. I know that's worth 5, so it's 15 hundredths. 15 out of 100. And last we have N, and this technically has 2 names. You technically could just write 7 tenths, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 10, and this is the fraction that would go with it. Or you could write 70 hundredths because you're focusing on each space. So all these spaces, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 are counted. And remember, the last digit names your decimal. So 70 hundredths. 2 different names, but you wouldn't want to write this decimal with that fraction because they're not actually representing the same thing. It'd be like saying 7 dimes and then you'd write the penny fraction for it. So just be mindful. All right, next set, starting with B. I see that it's past 2 tenths. And it only went 1 space. So 21 spaces out of 100 total. Then I move to M. It passes 5 tenths. And then I can see that it's on the very dark halfway point, which I know half of 10 is 5. And so 55 spaces over out of 100 total. And then last, S. I see that it passed 7 tenths, and it landed on the 100th right before 8 tenths. So 79 hundredths. So you'll do this activity. But the other activity that you'll work on is to name the point at these locations. So I need to find 44 hundredths and see what point's there. Well, remember, I know that 44 hundredths, well, these are the tenths, and then these are the additional hundredths. So I'm going to go to 4/10 first, and then I can see 4 more hundredths over. It's point I. Now this one's tricky. Again, if you continually label your places with the proper names, they'll direct you right where you need to go. So by labeling my names, I don't have any tenths. In fact, I'm going to go start at 0 where it started. Then 1, 2, 3 spaces over, or 3 hundredths, I find point B. Right? And here's this equivalency idea again. 6/10 is the same as 60 hundredths. So this one's really easy. I just need to find it right there, and it's point A. Right? Next, we'll try it one more time. It says name the point located at 8 hundredths. I want to see if you can find the point and name it in your head. I'll give you a second. If you said it was point J, you're correct. 8 out of 100 is a really small amount. So this is 5 hundredths, 6 hundredths, 7 hundredths, 8 hundredths. Now we go to 58 hundredths. I want you to see if you can find it and say it in your head. Right? If you said N, you're correct. 0.5 is where we start first. Then there's 5 in the middle, 6, 7, 8, point N. And then I know I'm getting a little bit repetitive, but here's that equivalency piece again. Even though it says 80 hundredths, I can also think about it as 8/10, and there it is right there. In my experience, number lines come really quickly and easily to kids, so I think you're going to have a lot of fun with them. But remember, if you do the practice activity and you're still having trouble, let me know. I can always work with you through our virtual meetings before you take your assessment. So good luck, and I'll see you next time.